Greetings and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I hope everyone's doing well tonight. Episode 30, Karl's Spirit Month. Tonight we're going to be tasting Yellowstone Select Kentucky Straight Bourbon. So, a little bit about Yellowstone here. It's fairly a new brand on the market. Actually, it's not a new brand, it's been around since 1872, but only recently has it really become fairly well known. First of all, it is a blended source bourbon from Limestone Branch Distillery in Lebanon, Kentucky. They are in turn, of course, owned by someone else, in this case, Luxco, the spirits giant. Limestone Branch does source its bourbon currently while they wait for their own juice to fully mature. This is their way of being able to fund their distillery. It is sourced probably from Heaven Hill, although no one will really come out and say that. And then blended by two men, brothers, Paul and Steve Bean, whose grandfather was, that's right, Minor Case Bean, the original owner of Yellowstone, and the nephew of Jim Bean. On the other side of the family, Paul and Steve, their great grandfather was none other than J.W. Dant, also a distilling legend in Kentucky. So these guys come from kind of bourbon royalty, if you will. They began producing the original Yellowstone bourbon in 1872, the same year that Yellowstone National Park was founded. It has been bottled since then with an interruption during Prohibition, but the brand has jumped from distillery to distillery to distillery until it was acquired by Limestone in partnership with Luxco. Luxco is trying to rehabilitate several bottom shelf bourbons. They want to bring them off the bottom shelf and get them into very current drinking rotation. So Yellowstone was one of those brands they really tried to rehabilitate, as is Ezra Brooks and Rebel Yell. One thing I really kind of like about Yellowstone that they're doing, Limestone Branch is donating a portion, we don't know how much, of their proceeds that they make on this bourbon to the National Parks Conservation Association. This is allowing our national parks to be preserved for future generations. So, guys, great job on that. Current bottles, they've been really producing heavily in the last 5 to 6 years. Current bottles, that's 2019, 2020, 2020, excuse me, have a blend of 4-year-old Lime Branch and then an older source bourbon, which is a 7-year, as I mentioned earlier, was probably from Heaven Hill, but we don't know that. There's also no mash bill listed, but likely I'm judging it's a little bit of a higher rye. I'm not saying it's 20% rye at all. It's probably in the neighborhood of 13 to 15% rye, but I think that's what they would generally say is a high rye. It is bottled at 93 proof. So this is a blend of 4-year and 7-year juice at 93 proof. In the glass, I know the glare is terrible. It's a light amber, maybe a medium amber color. It has decent lines. Nothing wrong with those at all. Thing I really don't care much about this bourbon is it does take a long time to open up. I really had to let this set for a little bit. I played with one glass with a couple drops of water. I played with one neat, just trying to get a good nose on this. And it takes a while to really, really open up. I'm going to go with the neat nose because that's what I've been doing on pretty much every other bourbon except for maybe two. But after a while in the glass, I'm talking probably 15 or 20 minutes, it begins to really develop those classic bourbon notes, caramels, vanillas, brown sugars. So right off the bat, I'm hooked. I really like those flavors. Those are kind of my classic notes that I really enjoy. So if you're saying you say that for every bourbon, that's because it's my taste profile. I have purchased those bourbons to have those particular notes. So it takes a while, like I said, but you begin to get those caramels and those vanillas and finally that brown sugar. Okay, so on the taste, it's warm, probably some allspice leading, but followed by some toffee, some smoky caramel. I also get a good spice on the end with a little light burn. It's not off-putting. It's a very good. There's something else in there. How about toasted vanilla wafer? It's a new flavor for me, but that's what it kind of reminds me of. It's a vanilla wafer that's been toasted a little bit. The finish, by the way, the mouthfeel is a medium mouthfeel. It's not particularly chewy. It's not as thin as some others we've had. It is a little bit on the oily side. It does coat the mouth really, really well. It's almost buttery as the way it kind of coats the sides of the tongue. The medium finish. The finish on this is really hard to describe, and I'm going to go with peanuts or peanut brittle. And I know that sounds really weird because I don't usually do peanuts, but that's where I'm getting this. It's a real nutty, almost peanut brittly finish. It's got a nice little burn down into the throat. There's nothing really complex here. But what I do think is that Yellowstone delivers a really good classic bourbon with some spicy, nutty flavors that's kind of unique. It's a warm feeling bourbon, and I'm going to try to explain that by saying it's comforting or it's a bourbon that you just want to share with friends around maybe a bonfire or something like that, and just have good conversations. It's definitely a sipping bourbon. I don't know how this would hold up in a cocktail. To me, it's a good sipping bourbon in a warm atmosphere, whether that's a friendship atmosphere, whether that's sitting around a bonfire. I'm not real sure. That's the image that it provokes in my mind. And that's what bourbon does. It provokes those images and makes you think a little bit, or at least for me, it does. So, Karl scale, I really like that warm feeling, whatever that is. I like the balance that the juice has. I like the idea that they're donating to our national park conservation fund. I'm going to give this 3 3/4 star. That's 3.75 stars on the Karl scale. I like this bourbon. I've had this bottle for a while. You can tell I'm down to about what, a drink and a half left, maybe two. I've really enjoyed this bourbon since I've had it. I don't go for it often, but there are times where I just really feel the need to go with Yellowstone, and I just enjoy the drink. It's a solid 3 3/4 star. So, guys, that's Yellowstone Select. By the way, the label has changed as of last year. It's now a white label. It's got some color on it. It's not the brown paper looking old antique label. So, 93 proof Yellowstone Select. It's a little on the more expensive side. It's a $40 to $50 bottle, but I think it's a good bourbon. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's Yellowstone Select. As always, stay safe, peace, and happy pours.